So silence your cell phones, hold your applause, and tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
Another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast is here. We're joined, as always, to my right, if you're watching on YouTube, Brandon Clement. You can find him on Twitter at Icebreaker21. You can find myself on Twitter and Instagram at KRock Jared. Another week, we're going to recap the WWE Draft. We're going to recap AEW and NXT Week 2 and much, much more. As always, make sure to follow the show on Twitter at Heel to the Face. So without further ado, let's get into the WWE Draft. We'll get to breaking news out, Brandon. I don't know if you know this, but as of recording, we have a new executive producer for SmackDown. Eric Bischoff has been relieved of his duties, and Bruce Pritchard has taken over. So actually, let's just start there. That's
Sweet.
The breaking news. We'll start there.
Yeah.
Bruce Pritchard is taking over SmackDown. Conrad Thompson is a part of AEW. So Bruce Pritchard now being a part of SmackDown, you can obviously imagine the Something to Wrestle With podcast. It might take a little bit of a hiatus while the two are working for rival companies.
Yeah, I think the podcast is no more, at least for a while. That's interesting news. I wonder what happened to our boy Bischoff.
Well, Bischoff wishes Pritchard nothing but success, but he is not with WWE anymore at all, according to WWE.
Do you think? What do you think it cost? What was the cause behind it? Any idea?
It's probably just a change. I don't want to say it has anything to do with Fox or USA executives. We'll get into that debacle and the draft nonsense in a few minutes related to that kind of silliness in the world of wrestling. But it's probably just a change. To be honest with you, I didn't really feel that it had Bischoff's stamp on SmackDown. Watching SmackDown, I feel like we didn't really have his stamp on things. Now, I don't know if we've had Paul Heyman's stamp on a few things on Monday Night Raw, other than maybe some of the TV-14 things. I don't know if that's necessarily Paul Heyman.
I'll say
but
this.
There's so many hands and cooks in the kitchen right now. It's hard to be like, you can tell somebody's taking over with Fox, with Vince being there, with Triple H. I feel like SmackDown right now is all hands on deck. It's not so much, even with with Bruce Pritchard, let's say, being there. Are we really going to notice much Bruce Pritchard because of the fact, with so much riding on SmackDown? I don't really feel that it's going to be just one man. It's not going to be like NXT.
Yeah, I don't
go
think
out there and
so.
have fun.
I think you're right. I think I think he's going to have his he's going to have his his say in certain things. But I think Vince McMahon's still going to have a big say.
A lot of people are going to have a big say.
Yeah,
on SmackDown.
Fox execs are going to have a big say. So this whole thing with Pritchard, it really doesn't mean anything, honestly. I mean, it's a cool title. Maybe it's.
I think it would mean more on NXT. NXT, I feel like Triple H has 100% say of what goes on NXT. Obviously,
well, it's his baby.
He's said that Vince McMahon has final say, but you can definitely tell that Triple H has really got his hands on NXT. Now, SmackDown and Raw, because WWE is a publicly traded company and those are very big shows, I feel that, it's good to have those minds working towards Raw. It's great to have Paul Heyman in the creative decisions. I'd rather have him there than not. And same with Bruce Pritchard, and then same with Eric Bischoff. But like I said, I just feel there's just so many people involved right now. I don't think that Friday night debut of SmackDown was all Eric Bischoff's idea. I feel like that was 1,000 people bringing in The Rock and bringing on the title and doing that. That just feels like star power. It didn't feel like Eric Bischoff really tweaking storylines. I don't think it was Eric Bischoff saying, hey, let's have Brock Lesnar win the belt. I think that was like Vince McMahon and Fox. And
they wanted that. I mean, unfortunately. But, did you notice the ratings came out? And week 1 to week 2, when you have The Rock on the show and then The Rock not on the show, the ratings dropped a pretty big chunk.
Now, SmackDown, what it got was, let's forget the Fox debut of SmackDown. The second Fox got, minus the debut, the second best rating of SmackDown of the year, but by not much. Meaning it would have not been too noticeable. Meaning they were averaging about 2.2 million on a good week, 2.4, and I believe the ratings for last week were about 2.8, 2.9. So essentially, not the double numbers like we saw in week 1, more just like a great SmackDown numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it was solid. I mean, considering, but I'm just kind of curious to see how this whole draft shakeup is. I mean, we were just going to talk about that earlier on in the show.
And
What do you think?
did you notice before we get into the draft that one other thing that kind of went back to the SmackDown world is the crowd? While they were in Las Vegas and had a big crowd, I could definitely tell it wasn't the upper deck full. It was tarped off on the upper deck, just the lower bowl of the Las Vegas arena.
Yeah.
So back to, it felt more just like a traditional. I guess the first week of SmackDown on Fox felt like a pay-per-view, felt like WrestleMania, felt like a big deal, executives, celebrities, the whole 9 yards. The second week felt like SmackDown.
Yeah, it did. And you know what? I'm not really surprised. I mean, the product is what it is. I mean, I'll be honest with you. With this draft, I mean, we got the whole list here. I mean, I'm perplexed about who's going what,
Well,
who's going
let's
where.
start with the draft. The first thing I want to talk about when it comes to the draft is the ridiculousness that we got in this draft of the USA and the Fox War Room. What did you make? I mean,
those look like the same. They were the same recordings from last week.
Yes, obviously Fox War Room. I love that the Fox robot was a part of the Fox War Room.
Well, yeah,
as well.
that was cool. But here's the thing: here you can tell, like the computer screen had the same background, it looked like a parrot in the background on one of the screens. I don't know if you caught that, but overall, you could tell it was all pre-recorded, obviously.
And you can tell that this was just ridiculousness because, to be honest with you, the draft. And those who are familiar with, let's say, fantasy football drafts, it really resembled nothing like a real draft. For example, a real draft, and this is, again, it's wrestling, okay? Becky Lynch or maybe the women's champion going first, that makes a little bit of sense. But in a real draft, if this was, let's say, actual people getting picked, and it would be like, the reason I equated to fantasy football, what is the first thing you draft in fantasy football?
It depends. Honestly, it depends on where you are. I mean,
most of the time it's a quarterback. It's a top player. It's a wide receiver.
Yeah,
yes.
well, yeah. You're going best on the board.
You're going best on the board, okay?
Yeah.
So if this was a real draft, you'd have to imagine Seth Rollins, Brock Lesnar. You'd have to imagine the champions would probably go pretty close to first. You need a world champion on your show because I'm looking at the draft right now. Your second pick was the OC, which is kind of ridiculous because, again, that goes with why does AJ Styles and the rest of the OC go as one pick?
Well, I think it's because they're a faction. I think that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
it makes sense because, let's be honest, no offense to Gallows and Anderson, without AJ Styles and this whole OC, they might as well just go to AEW.
Well, I'm just saying, let's look at this as a realistic, let's pretend for 1 minute, one weird minute, that wrestling's a real sport. Okay? You want to get away with somebody like AJ Styles, who's great, to be able to be packaged in with other people. The AJ Styles is good enough by himself. That would be like a steal. You want to, I get it. Some of these lower level guys getting packaged together, but let's say, like the Shield wouldn't be one pick. I mean, that's not fair. Like you can't package Tom Brady and, a few wide receivers in as a pick in the NFL world. Another thing is, again, as I mentioned, you'd have, champions get drafted. I think the number one pick would probably be Seth Rollins or Brock Lesnar. And the number two pick, if SmackDown really made the number two pick Roman Reigns, would be the other champion. What a surprise. The champions are all split up. Obviously, real picks here. Fox execs would actually be laughing if they had Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins on the same show and had all the champions because, we saw champions not get picked until SmackDown.
Yeah, there were some interesting picks. Like I see Akira Tozawa. What has he been up to?
Yeah,
what?
That's why this war room seemed even more ridiculous because they're like, before Seth Rollins and Brock Lesnar were drafted, Nikki Cross was drafted, and nobody would be really high-fiving in a war room that they just got Nikki Cross while Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins are still on the board.
It was very, very odd. It's like
it's not like if we were to have I was to play a video game with you and we're play WWE and we're picking Survivor Series. I wouldn't say, oh, I see Brock Lesnar, I see Roman Reigns, I see Bray. Oh, Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss are still on the board.
Man,
love the women's division, and I understand picking the champions of the women's division very highly. But you're not taking Carmella that high. You're not taking Carmella in the real world. Yeah, Carmella in the real world would be one of these supplemental picks. In the real world, most of the women's division would be, the women in my eyes, and I don't mean to sound rude here, are kickers. At least not the champions. And maybe like Charlotte if she's not the champion.
Yeah, no, I get
Charlotte not
that,
the
yeah.
champion's high pick. But for the most part, like in the draft world, it's the kickers.
Yeah,
It's you pick them up
yeah.
in free agency. You pick them up down the line.
Yeah, how the hell did
how did
Cesaro?
Tamina get drafted? Well, still undrafted, Cesaro, Luke Harper, Apollo Crews, and Mojo Rawley. Still undrafted in the women's division, the Iconics. Now, if you're picking teams, I'd pick the Iconics over just Nikki Cross.
And Corey Graves' favorite, Fire and Desire, didn't get drafted as well. That was interesting. How about this? AOP?
Yeah.
They've been building these guys up and undrafted. What is the what's the deal here?
But no, the Street Profits, that's okay. They haven't wrestled anything. They sit in the back and they just chit chat and they go, you don't want any of this smoke, but they got drafted.
Yeah, well, they got smoke in the hands of the OC on Monday night. But it's weird though. The numbers that I'm looking at, and I'm glad we got this printout here. 3 tag teams on Raw and 6 on SmackDown. Shouldn't it be the other way around because of the
they
timing?
were talking about
That's weird.
The whole timing situation. Obviously, Carmelo's drafted to SmackDown. Andrade and Charlotte are staying together. They did a lot of that.
Oh, actually,
keeping, some of the couples together.
This list needs to be updated, by the way. I think Mike and Maria Kanellis are leaving WWE.
Well, if you want to talk Mike and Maria Kanellis, one of them has asked for their release. Mike Kanellis, back on the indie scene or wherever he goes, will be Mike Bennett again. He's Mike Kanellis because he's feeding off the Maria Kanellis thing.
Yes.
I can understand why he asked for his release. I mean, he's not being he's healthy and he's not being
poorly used. He's being poorly used. He's used as Maria's bitch, so to speak.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, in Impact Wrestling and the other places he's been, he was a much bigger name. I'm not saying necessarily he's in the world title picture, but he's a Shinsuke Nakamura level competitor in AEW. So why would or an Impact or anywhere else? So why wouldn't he go to one of those places? Why wouldn't he ask for his release?
He's probably here's the thing. I could see him being like a Shawn Spears, so to speak. I could see him being in the main event hunt on AEW because here's the thing. WWE screwed up with our boy Ty Dillinger, and I was saying that we've talked in episodes for years, and I've always been high on Ty Dillinger, and it's so good to see a guy like him, now known as Shawn Spears, getting that push. Hell of a match this past week, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, he's doing a great job.
I think put on a better show the second week than they did the first week. The show.
Yeah, I would agree.
And we got the Inner Circle with Chris Jericho. We'll talk about that in a minute, but staying with Mike and Maria Kanellis here. Maria Kanellis did put out that she has not asked for her release.
So it's not a package deal. Okay.
It is not a pack. Well, because they are doing something with her. I mean, it's not a turmoil between the two of them. I think they're doing the most that they probably can do with Maria Kanellis right now. I mean, they got her involved in some stuff.
And she's preggo, so.
Yeah. So exactly, she's not going to go to another company.
Yeah, she's not going to go.
The best she's going to do is talking in the back.
She's not doing Hell in a Cell.
Yes. So she's doing the best she can do right now in the wrestling world. While Mike, he obviously could be wrestling, which he's not doing, except for maybe the occasional 205 Live match.
Let me ask you, what do you make of Shorty Gable? This new Shorty Gable.
I think it's ridiculously dumb.
Yeah, why? Just go back.
That doesn't help him at all. I don't understand.
No, I don't think it's good either. I want him just to be Chad Gable, the guy who's the former Olympian, not Shorty Gable. And to me, he's good on his own without making some ridiculous new gimmick, new name. He's even got it on the Tron now. It's like, come on, let's stop doing
Shorty
that.
Gable is dumb. It's one of those things that I understand that the heels give you a name, but you don't adopt that name for yourself.
No, I mean
it's derogatory.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I mean, I guess it's something for him to fuel the fire. No, just be Chad Gable. You're you're a former Olympian. Let's go off of that.
Yeah, because you're only making yourself work by fueling if you want to be recognized better, you don't stoop down to their level.
Yeah, 100%. No, you just say screw you.
It's fine for Baron Corbin to call him Shorty Gable. He's the heel, and he's trying to tear him down. It'd be like one thing if a bully in high school or in middle school picks on you and calls you a stupid name, and then you adopt that name for yourself. I get the whole thing of empowerment. You take the name upon yourself and you empower it. But not in this situation. No. Shorty Gable's dumb. It doesn't make him look any better. It just makes him look like he's going to give into that.
Speaking of Baron Corbin, is he the best heel in sports entertainment right now?
The best heel in sports entertainment. I mean, Chris Jericho's doing a pretty good job over there in AEW. Obviously, the Inner Circle T-shirts hitting the stores.
I'm sure they're going to get sold out pretty quick because their Inner Circle's a great name, by the way. I like that. Now, I got to ask you, kind of transitioning over to Dynamite this past week, my takeaway is, so MJF, he's not a heel? Is that what this is now? I mean, I know he was Rhodes' boy, but he attacked the heels. We all for a second, everyone's like, is he going to be an Inner Circle? And then he hit those guys he hit the boys with the chairs, and I'm like, all right, so is he a face or a heel?
He might be an in-betweener.
You think so?
I mean, and that's probably the thing is he started out as a heel with the company, but
Yeah,
obviously a
full
lot of
bump.
people Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that's the phrase, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He kind of, bringing him up, kind of doing the whole where he's playing the heel, but they're cheering for him. So he's got to be, the in-between.
Well, it's kind of like how Miz was for a little bit too. Like,
yeah.
he was being
Miz has definitely gone back and forth so many times.
Yeah, Miz, sometimes you can't even keep up. Like 1 week, I feel like he's a face, and 1 week he's a heel. I'm just curious because before this whole Chris Jericho Inner Circle thing, I thought MJF was the best heel in the business. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he cut good promos. He interacted well with the fans. He also was kind of a jerk in the ring. I like MJF. I think he's got a bright future. I think that was a guy that WWE wishes they had. He's really good.
So let's move on to, and maybe this is how we'll kind of, go towards the end of the show here, unless we got something more AEW, WWE to talk about. But let's move on to like some other promotions, and we got some news coming out of those. Let's start with the fact that Wrestle Kingdom New Japan Wrestling announced a match today. They announced 2 matches, but we'll talk about the one main match that they announced, and that's Kota Ibushi versus Okada, the 2 people that we're all familiar with in the wrestling world. If you're not a huge underground indie wrestling fan, you know of those guys because they were facing Kenny Omega in years past. But what made me think about that today when they made the announcement for Wrestle Kingdom is what kind of hit now is something like that. We got pretty excited about Wrestle Kingdom the last couple of years. We got on board because of people like the Young Bucks, because of people like Kenny Omega. But now they're not a part of that anymore. And this is the WrestleMania of New Japan Wrestling, a big event coming up in January, as it is always.
Yep.
What do you see for Wrestle Kingdom? Let's say the American interest. Let's say it was at 100% before. You had 100% interest in for it before AEW came into existence, or let's say a year or 2 ago. What is your interest, or what do you think wrestling fans' interest should still be in New Japan Wrestling and Wrestle Kingdom?
Honestly, it's probably going to drop down into like the 50s. I think it's going to be half because I bet you a lot of the New Japan fans were, they were looking for an alternative to WWE, which now they have in AEW. So
Yeah.
I feel like we're going to. I think New Japan's going to take a big hit, and they already have, obviously, because they've lost, big name like Kenny Omega. But I think it's in the 50s. I think it's like almost like a 50-50. I think they're going to lose a bunch. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Now, moving on from New Japan Wrestling and Wrestle Kingdom and how they're going to recover now in their first Wrestle Kingdom with AEW in existence. I don't know if you checked this out. I've only seen bits and pieces. But if you checked out the new NWA Power, which airs on YouTube, I think Facebook on Tuesday nights. Are you familiar with this show?
I'm not, no.
So NWA Power, it's a television show. Essentially, Billy Corgan owns the NWA rights. He owns the title. They decided with all the wrestling stuff going on to kind of get in the mix and create a weekly television show for NWA. It's called NWA Power. It's on for about an hour every single Tuesday. I think they back tape some episodes. But looking at the people we got this week, I mean, there you got Trevor Murdoch's in the mix, Cole Cabana, Ken Anderson, Homicides on the card. Obviously, your champion you have, if you're familiar with Impact Wrestling's past, Eli Drake. And who is the current champion? I forgot it was the Magnus. He is the current NWA champion.
Oh,
Magnus
yeah,
TA or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I know.
But
yes.
but one thing that's really unique about this, and this caught my eye, and I saw it and made me watch this, is the show is filmed in old NWA style. It's filmed in front of a live studio audience, not a arena audience, and it just the fonts, the interview programs, just everything about it is filmed 80s style.
So it's cool.
Yes. Are you familiar with like watching old wrestling, let's say from the 80s, where it was like filmed in like a TV studio?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
100%.
So like I'll bring it up here to show you, give you a little better example. But if you haven't checked this out, I haven't checked out too much of it myself, but I'm looking forward to checking out more NWA Power. But like there's kind of I'm putting it up on the screen for Brandon to look at.
Yeah, that's cool. That is so old school. I love that look.
Yeah, it's got the whole like I'm looking at where they do the interviews right now, and I can picture the Ric Flair interview happening in something that looked exactly like that back in the 80s when you see Ric Flair and you see
so
Dusty
cool.
Rhodes, giving those interviews and and they wear the old suits, you know what I mean? All the interviewers are in nice blazers and suits, and it's so they definitely, if you're looking for something that's different, you're looking for more than just more wrestling, but you're looking for something that's definitely got a different look to it, a different feel to it, more than just the wrestling aspect. Check out NWA Power. Like I said, I haven't checked out enough of it, but I am interested in checking out more NWA Power.
Now you got me turned on to it. I'm going to check it out.
There's like an example of, it looks old school. It's, everything old is new again, and retro things are always on the in. So
Of course.
give it up for NWA for embracing the 70s and 80s look. and really maybe not bringing it back to prominence, but bringing it,
make it a different, make it kind of cool. It looks.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll have to check it out. I'll have to report next week on the next episode and let you know, because it definitely, I like the look just from the pictures you're showing me here on the Google. So I'm curious to see how it's going to be.
Yeah. So moving on, Brandon's favorite topic, something that definitely gets swept under the rug. It seems more and more irrelevant every single year, especially now with AEW. We just mentioned NWA, New Japan Wrestling, but I don't know. It's like a cockroach, and we'll talk about this at the end of the day, but Impact Wrestling can't ever die.
Apparently.
I don't even
my
understand
God.
how all these other companies, they are so big and then they blow right out. And we, especially in the football world, we've seen it with the old XFL or the AAF, they make such a huge impact and then they're gone. But Impact Wrestling never really made a huge impact. And I don't know how they do it, but they somehow manage, somebody that's behind Impact Wrestling really just loves Impact. There's somebody out there who just doesn't want, from the executive standpoint, I'm saying, doesn't want Impact Wrestling to ever die. Because whatever they got to do, however they got to cut the budget, like we saw in WCW back in the day, they just cut their TV off and they were done. That's essentially what happened. They said, we don't really want this TV program anymore. But whether they got to find new TV homes, whether they got to cheapen the ring, whether they got to cheapen the entranceway, whether they got to find different audiences, they got to give away tickets, whatever they got to do to keep it alive, they do it. I don't think it's so much about how much money they can make. I think it's literally just about keeping it alive. And if last year's revenue was a negative $20,000, instead of just folding like another company, they just find where they can drop $20,000 off the budget and move on for another year.
So wait, how do they afford Ken Shamrock then?
I mean, they get by. They make as much money as they can. So
I mean, I know a few of the names, like Sammy Callahan's he's a good guy.
I don't think Ken Shamrock's a full-fledged Impact Wrestling member, but one, we're talking about Bound for Glory, their WrestleMania. Back in the day, this was the same pay-per-view that tried to compete with WWE. It had Sting and Jeff Hardy and all the big names. Kurt Angle,
Ric Flair.
This was their event. This was this was the event that Impact Wrestling back in the day when it was trying to do what AEW is doing now. This was their big event, and it's still going strong. I went 2 years ago when it was in Ottawa in front of 600 people. It's going to take place this weekend, Sunday, October the 20th. It is from Chicago or from outside of Chicago in the Odeum Expo Center, which is a place, Ring of Honor has held a lot of shows. It's known for some professional wrestling, but looking at this card, Brian Cage versus Sami Callihan for the title. I mean, obviously that's a far cry from what Impact Wrestling was 10 years ago.
Yeah, of course.
When it comes to the big names, it'd be Kurt Angle versus Jeff Jarrett with AJ Styles in his corner. I mean, stuff like that we don't have anymore, but still either way, it's worth checking out. Maybe not worth paying the pay-per-view price to purchase, but obviously with so many streaming services and so many ways to still watch.
Yeah, there's ways to get around.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
And maybe not the whole card, but this is definitely something worth checking out. Personally, I want to check out this tag team match. Rhino and RVD, what do they still got in the tank? They're teaming up to face Rich Swann, who's somebody WWE, they let go for all the issues that he had in the past, but you can't deny he is an incredible talent. Yeah, he was very entertaining. He was one of those 205 Live guys that kept me entertained back in the day. Yep. Teaming up with Willie Mack and some guys that I'm familiar with from local independent wrestling, Ethan Page and Josh Alexander, who are labeled as the North because of their Canadian ties. But another match, I'm not familiar with a lot of people on the list, but Tessa Blanchard, the female, obviously the daughter of great Tully Blanchard. Yep. She's going to be in an intergender ladder match for the X Division Championship. I mean, that seems like it would be interesting as well. And obviously, Ken Shamrock versus Moose. Moose has been in Impact Wrestling for a while. I saw him.
Moose is he's a former football player in the NFL, and he actually played here at Syracuse University, as a matter of fact.
And I've seen him. He's definitely somebody who's been in the Impact Wrestling world. And funny
he's not. Moose ain't bad.
Ken Shamrock actually was in Impact Wrestling in their debut episodes. Back in the day when they were a pay-per-view only promotion.
He must need to get paid.
But he's back in action, taking on Moose. So like I said, Ken Shamrock versus Moose in kind of like a UFC-style match. Obviously, you have
Tennille Dashwood?
Yes, formerly known as
Emma. Yep.
I mean, you got her in there for the Knockouts Championship.
I'm surprised she's
Desmond Xavier. He's obviously somebody I've seen around before, both in Ring of Honor and other places.
There's some names in there.
Yes.
I'm cool. I'm interested to see how RVD and Rhino are. I mean, that might be something to check out.
Yeah, I mean, the names definitely
There's some names, yeah.
Yes, there's some names in there that definitely are good enough to keep you interested to watch. And you got to give it to Impact Wrestling. While I said the championship match. The championship match is not a huge ordeal because it's, or what it was in the past. Like I said, it's not Sting and Kurt Angle.
No.
You know, it's not like, and WWE's advertising currently, this is the first time we're seeing Team Flair versus Team Hogan, which is not true. But let's end the show back in the WWE realms. Let's end the show with how Raw went off the air this week. Seth Rollins burning down the Firefly Funhouse.
Interesting.
And setting up for their match in Saudi Arabia, which is going to be a Falls Count Anywhere match.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
What's the point of this now that Bray Wyatt's on SmackDown? I thought this is like a dead set thing. These guys are on SmackDown, these guys are on Raw.
No, they're just going to make up some new wild card rule. That's just how it goes.
Because, I mean, Bray Wyatt's on SmackDown, right? So I thought, I was excited when Bray Wyatt got drafted to SmackDown because I thought that was a way that they were going to kill this.
Well, I guess, he can't be killed, so to speak. So I guess
Seth Rollins has spoken out against the end of Hell in a Cell. He spoke out and he says the defense to Hell in a Cell is that it wasn't a disqualification, that the match was stopped, so it doesn't really go against Hell in a Cell rules. And a similar thing actually almost happened in the famous Undertaker versus Mick Foley match, where the match was, and realistically, almost stopped.
Yeah, because
he actually says he says people like Mick Foley probably wish it got stopped because maybe he'd still be wrestling to this day, or he'd have a much longer career if things like that did get stopped. So Seth Rollins defends the end of Hell in a Cell, saying it wasn't a disqualification. It was just a referee stopping a match. And, well, that could have happened in the original Hell in a Cell match, or not the original, but the King of the Ring one.
Of course.
Very much the same, trying to pretty much take some steam off of how it did end. I guess it would have been better, maybe if it got stopped and Bray Wyatt didn't get back up. Because the King of the Ring one is a little bit different because no one saw it going there. We didn't wonder how somebody was going to lose, but we saw heading into this Hell in a Cell match. The problem with it getting stopped is we did see going into this Hell in a Cell match the implications and the troubles they have with keeping the title on Seth Rollins while having Bray Wyatt lose. So it wasn't part of, their back and forth rivalry. It's not a back and forth rivalry. That's why we were wondering how it's going to be, because how are both of these people going to end up the winner at the end of the night, essentially?
It was a lose-lose situation is really what it was.
So while the match, did get stopped, Seth Rollins is just being a company man. You can't blame him for that. But, he did speak out and did say, and I did kind of like the fact that he did say it was a referee stoppage versus disqualification. It gives it a little bit of hope, but still either way, that would have been a great time to end this feud. But now we're going to get a Falls Count Anywhere match at Crown Jewel.
Yeah.
I guess
this Crown Jewel thing is ridiculous. It's just it's like they're just going to pay top dollar for top names like Tyson Fury, and then you got Cain Velasquez. There's some star power there, and I think the Saudis are like, yeah, let's name your price, Tyson, name your price, Cain, let's go.
Yeah, here's the thing though. One quick question. Would you rather see those guys perform at an event that's like this, or would you rather them take up WrestleMania time?
I'd rather have them take WrestleMania time because
you are interested enough in Tyson Fury versus Braun Strowman.
Yeah, it's Tyson Fury. I'm a boxing guy too, so it's like I've been a fan of his for a long time. That match that match he had with Wilder, that was a draw. That was a great match, and when I saw he was linked to WWE, I was like, ooh, all right, well, we'll see. It's probably going to be some dumb gimmicky thing like it normally is, but we'll see.
We'll talk more Crown Jewel. At least there's no other pay-per-view like that's immediately right on the horizon. I'll give WWE. This is the one time it seems like they're not like butting up against another pay-per-view while promoting Crown Jewel, because that's what they kind of did in the past. They're promoting these other pay-per-views. Like they were like building matches for the following real pay-per-view while still having this one go on. So it seems like at least they're kind of building this up as the only pay-per-view of the month.
Yeah, which is good. I think it's aesthetically, I think it's the way to do it. And
you got to treat it like it's just one of the month. You can't just have it as like an in-between month pay-per-view.
No, it makes no sense. And then I think, what was it, last year? Backlash was, or last time it was like Backlash.
It was like Greatest Royal Rumble was one weekend and Backlash was the next weekend, and you're building up both pay-per-views at the same time.
It was bad.
Yeah, well, the one negative I guess they're going to come from it is, while they're not building up two pay-per-views at a time, we have mentioned that there will be still a SmackDown the night after, so they still have to put a SmackDown on Fox the night after this pay-per-view as well.
Good luck with that, guys.
Yeah, good luck with everyone getting back from Saudi Arabia in time to get to Buffalo, New York. We'll see if that happens, but we'll talk more Crown Jewel next week. We didn't even get to Bayley becoming the new world champion, cutting her hair, cutting her inflatable waving.
And she is now a full-fledged
She's now officially. We'll talk maybe more
yeah.
about that next week. This has been the Heel of the Face podcast for Brandon the Icebreaker Clements, myself, K-Rock, Jared. We will see you next week.